My name is Luna, and at 15 I ran from a family tradition that cloaked itself in honor but reeked of control. In our tight-knit community in suburban California, everything looked harmless from the outside. Rows of tidy houses, neighbors waving, families gathering on weekends. But behind that facade, a darker truth thrived. Girls were married off the moment their bodies betrayed them with their first period, handed over to men old enough to be their fathers, sometimes even older. We were told this was sacred, that obedience kept our families whole. I grew up believing it, believing my fate was sealed in blood. But when I was 11, I saw something I could never unsee. My cousin Lila, barely 13, was promised to a 47-year-old widower named Victor Crane. His 2 previous wives had both died before they reached 25. The whispers said heart failure, but the women in our community exchanged glances heavy with unspoken truth. They knew those girls' bodies had been used up too soon, their lives drained before they had even begun. That night, something in me hardened. I pushed away the food on my plate, not out of vanity, but out of survival. I had noticed the thinnest girls bled last, their childhood stretched a little longer. Hunger became my shield, and though starvation clawed at me, I embraced it. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. My ribs poked through my skin, earning me cruel nicknames like Ghost Girl from my cousins. They whispered it with smirks at family gatherings, as if my suffering were some sort of entertainment. But I didn't care. Hollow ache in my belly reminded me I was still buying time, still holding back the tide that threatened to drown me. Every Friday from midnight until dawn, I served meals to the men in our family, uncles, cousins, and my father, Samuel. Silence was demanded of me. A single glance, a single sound, meant 10 lashes from the leather belt kept on a hook by the kitchen door. Each strike burned into my skin, branding me with the reminder of where I stood, beneath them. My mother, Elena, did her part in shaping me into their ideal. Every night she slathered my face with bleaching cream, the chemical sting filling my nostrils as she whispered, "This will make you desirable." I learned to smile through the pain, to pretend I longed for the life they envisioned, marriage, babies, obedience. Inside, though, my heart thundered with defiance, beating louder than the silence they forced upon me. 14, still period-free, I stumbled across the truth that cracked everything open. Until then, I believed my mother's voice when she said this was our culture's way. I thought maybe this was just how life worked, even here. But then came the day my history teacher, Ms. Clara Bennett, called me in for a private meeting. She'd noticed my skeletal frame beneath a loose sweater and asked gentle questions, her brow furrowed with concern. I gave her nothing but polite answers. Trust was not something I knew how to give. Then the moment came that changed my life. She stepped out to take a call, leaving her desk unattended. Top drawer sat slightly open. Curiosity and desperation pulled me forward. My fingers slid it wider, and inside I found books and pamphlets, titles that lit a spark in my chest. Your Rights as a Teen, When Tradition Becomes Abuse, guides on child marriage laws, all spelling out a truth I had never been told. Marriage under 18 was illegal. No exceptions. My hands trembled as I read, my pulse rushing in my ears. Could it really be true? That all those years of fear, all the rituals and lashings, were not protected by some unbreakable law? Before Ms. Bennett returned, I slipped one pamphlet into the waistband of my skirt. That night, under the blanket with a dim flashlight, I read every word until the paper nearly tore from my grip. There were phone numbers for hotlines, addresses of shelters, even phrases to use if I ever needed to trigger a mandatory report from a teacher or counselor. Felt like holding a key to a door I had never known existed. For the first time, I tasted something like power, and I couldn't keep it to myself. In my uncle's garage, I started a secret group with 5 younger cousins, girls who had not yet bled. We met in hushed voices, our backs pressed to cold cement walls, the smell of motor oil hanging in the air. I told them what I had learned, passing the pamphlet from hand to hand until its edges curled. We rehearsed sentences like lifelines, repeating them in whispers. "They're forcing me to marry at 14. Help me. I don't feel safe at home." My cousin Sophie, only 12, clutched the pamphlet as though it were a sacred text. Her wide eyes reflected both terror and hope. She promised she would never forget those words. In that garage, with fear pressing against us like a second skin, we began to dream of another world. One where tradition no longer chained us, one where survival didn't mean silence. And for the first time in my life, I felt less alone. We practiced until the words felt like weapons, sharper than the belts and cruel jokes that had marked us for years. But at 15, my body betrayed me. It happened on an ordinary morning as I prepared breakfast. A sudden warmth spread down my thighs, and when I glanced at my jeans, the sight of blood made my stomach twist. Before I could hide it, my mother's triumphant scream split the air. She called out like she'd won a prize, and within seconds the house filled with footsteps. My aunts, cousins, even my father rushed in. They pressed kisses onto my cheeks, chanting "blessed" as if blood made me holy. To them, this was the moment my life began. To me, it was the moment it ended. By dusk, the announcement was official. My husband had been chosen. Victor Crane. Now 50, a wealthy real estate tycoon with a predator's smile and a history carved in graves. His last wives had all been young, vibrant, and dead before their 25th birthdays. The dread that filled me was suffocating, blurring my vision and making each breath shallow. And then, as if fate had twisted the knife deeper, Sophie got her first period that same day. She was only 12. Within hours, she was promised to a 53-year-old car dealer, a man known for parading his wives like trophies. I watched Sophie's bright eyes dim, her spirit extinguished in a single afternoon. That night, while the family celebrated, I slipped her my notebook. Inside were every hotline number, every escape route, every phrase that could shatter our prison if said to the right person. I leaned close and whispered, "Tell Ms. Bennett tomorrow." Use the words we practiced. Sophie clutched the notebook to her chest, nodding with a resolve far greater than her years. My own wedding was set for 2 weeks later. 2 weeks until I would be caged. But deep down, I knew time was even shorter. The walls of tradition were closing in, and hesitation could mean the end. The very next night, a knock thundered at our front door. Child Protective Services. Sophie had spoken. She had used the words. And now they were here, demanding to interview every girl under 18. My family turned feral the moment CPS left. The air inside the house felt like it could snap in half. My uncles shouted, my cousins cursed, and my father ripped through drawers and cupboards as if the walls themselves were hiding a traitor. It didn't take them long. In the garage, beneath the rusted tools and oil-stained rags, they found my notebook, the one filled with statutes I had copied word for word, hotline numbers, addresses of shelters. My lifeline. My father held it high like evidence in a trial, his face swollen red, eyes bulging with fury. In front of everyone, he set it alight. The thin paper curled black in the flames, and I smelled the burning ink as though my veins themselves were on fire. "You are a plague," he thundered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Tomorrow you will marry Victor. Before you ruin us all." The room tilted, my vision blurring as if I had been spun around and dropped. My mother, Elena, stood at his side. Her eyes, once the only gentle place I knew, were now flat, cold stones. She didn't speak, but her silence struck me harder than any belt. I had lost her too. Dawn, the women of my family began preparations. They laid out crimson silk threaded with gold, fabric meant to shroud me like an offering. The smell of incense filled my room, thick and suffocating. My heart beat against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew this was my final chance. From beneath my bed, I pulled out the plastic bag I had hidden weeks before. One change of clothes, scraps of paper with addresses scrawled on them, and 15 crumpled dollars stolen from my mother's purse, a coin at a time. It wasn't much, but it was survival. Footsteps echoed closer down the hall. My chance was slipping. I bent forward, clutching my stomach, letting out a guttural groan. By the time my mother burst into the room, dressed already in her finest jewelry, tears streaked my face. "Something's wrong," I gasped, doubling over again. "The pain, it hurts. I need the bathroom." She hesitated. In our community, a sick bride meant bad omens. I pressed harder, sobbing until my voice cracked. "Finally," she nodded, impatience laced with fear. "Go. Quickly." I stumbled into the bathroom and locked the door. My heart thundered in my chest. The mirror reflected a girl who looked half alive, but her eyes burned with a desperate fire. Climbing onto the toilet seat, I reached for the ceiling tile I had loosened with trembling fingers weeks earlier. Came free with a groan of old plaster. I shoved my plastic bag into the dark hollow above, praying it wouldn't fall back through. Then came the window. Small, square, painted shut for years. I had worked the edges loose with a spoon stolen from the kitchen, scraping away paint until flakes littered the sill. Now I dug my nails into the frame, muscles screaming. Voices rose outside the bathroom, my aunts gossiping, my father's growl cutting through. "Break it down," he barked. Panic surged through me, raw and electric. The door rattled, hinges whining under the first blow. I pushed harder, the wood frame cutting my arms as it scraped open an inch, then two. The sting of raw skin meant nothing compared to what waited if I failed. My body twisted sideways, forcing itself into the opening as footsteps thundered closer. The frame tore at me, paint chipping beneath my palms, but the sliver of sky beyond was freedom. One last shove, and I was halfway out when the bathroom door cracked against its lock. As the bathroom door splintered, I forced my body through the narrow window, scraping my arms raw against the frame. The night air hit me cold and damp. I dropped onto the wet grass below, the impact twisting my ankle with a sharp jolt. Pain shot up my leg, but I couldn't stop. Behind me came the guttural shouts of men, their voices swelling with fury as if I had stolen something sacred. In a way, I had my own life. I ran barefoot through the dark neighborhood, streets I had memorized since childhood. Each house looked the same, yet every window hid families who would drag me back without question if they saw me. My nightgown snagged on fences and thorns, ripping as I tore through backyards. Trash cans rattled when I ducked behind them, trying to stay hidden from the sweeping beams of headlights that combed the streets. Car engines revved, and I heard Leo, my cousin, shouting from somewhere close, his voice sharp and commanding, "Check every corner!" Blood smeared the pavement where I stepped. A shard of glass had embedded itself in my heel, and with every stride, fire burned through my foot. Till I pushed forward. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. Just 2 blocks between me and the sliver of hope I clung to. I burst out from an alley just as the bus screeched to a halt. Desperation clawed at my throat as I waved wildly, my breath ragged, eyes blurring with tears. The driver, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, her name tag reading Marla, hesitated for only a second before holding the door open. She saw the bloody feet, the shredded gown, the terror written across my face. I fumbled for the $15 I had hidden, but panic and the frantic escape had left my pockets empty. My chest sank with despair. Then a hand extended, a wrinkled palm offering money. An old man seated near the front pressed a few bills into Marla's hand. "She's covered," he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. He guided me into the seat beside him, his arm a shield as Leo's car screamed past the bus windows, headlights slicing the night. The ride to the courthouse felt endless, yet my heart refused to calm. Every vibration of my phone in my bag made my skin crawl. I didn't need to check to know the names: Mom, Dad, Leo, and numbers I didn't recognize. Each message, each missed call was a tether trying to pull me back. I ignored them all. When the bus finally stopped downtown, dawn was breaking pale and gray. I hobbled the last block, leaving smeared prints of blood on the polished marble steps of the courthouse. My legs trembled as I pushed through the doors, the sterile hum of fluorescent lights above me a strange kind of sanctuary. The counter, a clerk looked up. Her badge read Miss Harper. Her eyes widened as she took in my disheveled state, the crimson trail I dragged behind me. She didn't ask questions at first, just pulled forms from a drawer and slid them across. "Emergency protective order," I choked, my throat dry but my voice clear. "I'm 15. They're making me marry today." Her face tightened and she leaned closer, her pen ready. I gave her everything: Victor Crane's name, his dead wives, the belt lashes, the bleaching cream, the burns from so-called wife training. Each word felt like ripping a scar wide open, but I refused to stop. My phone buzzed again and again. Mom, Dad, Leo. Numbers I didn't know. I kept my hands clenched, refusing to listen, knowing exactly what the voicemails would say: that I was cursed, a traitor, the plague my father had named me. But for the first time, someone else was listening. And that changed everything. The judge granted the order right there in the courthouse lobby. No robes, no solemn speeches, just a clipped signature on the paper and the words "effective immediately" that were supposed to mean safety. But when the clerk called the nearest shelter, the voice on the other end said there wasn't a single bed left. I stood there clutching the order like it was a lifeline made of paper, realizing I had nowhere to go. My body felt hollow, like I was walking inside a bell that had just been struck. Then I remembered Ms. Bennett. Her little blue hatchback always sat in the far corner of the Lincoln High parking lot on weekends. She graded papers there because, she once told us, the quiet soothed her migraines. I half ran, half limped across town, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. When I reached the school, the building's brick walls looked almost gentle compared to the courthouse marble. I climbed the steps, pushed open the door, and followed the faint smell of coffee to her classroom. She was bent over a stack of essays, glasses sliding down her nose. When she looked up and saw me, my torn shirt, my bare, cut feet, her face went pale. "Oh God," she whispered, pushing her chair back so fast it scraped the floor. "They were going to make me marry him," I sobbed, holding out the order like proof. "The shelter's full. I don't know where to go." Without a word, she pulled out the first aid kit she kept in her desk. Her hands trembled with fury as she cleaned the dirt and blood from my feet, the alcohol stinging but also making me feel human again. My phone rang. The screen lit up with my father's name. Before I could stop her, Ms. Bennett picked up. "She's with me," she said evenly. Her tone stayed steady until he started talking about medication and mental health episodes. Something in her eyes hardened. She hung up, setting the phone face down on the desk. "They're tracking you," she said. "Reset it. Now." The words barely left her mouth before we heard engines outside. She strode to the door, locking it, then pulled the blinds down one by one. Male voices rose from the parking lot, my father's, my uncle's. "Come out," they called. "You're sick. You need help." I showed Ms. Bennett my scars in the dim classroom light, burns shaped like pot handles, welts patterned from belts. She snapped photos with her phone, her jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Then she dialed 911. "Men are trying to break into the school," she told the dispatcher. "My students in danger." The sirens came faster than I expected. Red and blue lights flashed against the blinds and the voices outside scattered. But my father stayed just long enough to stage his performance for the officers. When they arrived, he held up a stack of fake prescriptions with my name on them, speaking in a voice smooth as glass. "She's ill," he insisted. "We're just trying to get her home," Ms. Bennett countered without hesitation. She pulled out my essays, one she'd graded but apparently read more deeply than I realized, where I'd hidden fragments of truth. Cooking lessons that meant burns. Marriage prep that meant beatings. Her voice didn't shake as she laid the papers out like evidence. Purity footage sealed the rest. It showed my father arriving with the prescriptions already in hand, exposing the lie. By the time CPS arrived, my hands were still shaking, but for the first time that day, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. They placed me with Mrs. Evelyn Carter, a retired social worker known for taking in hard cases. Her home was nothing like my parents'. Cameras at every corner, alarms on the windows, a tall fence that looked like it could hold back a storm. She had sharp eyes but a soft voice. She led me to a bedroom with a lock on the inside. "You're safe here," she said, her hand hovering at my shoulder like she wanted to hug me but didn't want to startle me. That night, even with the lock, I couldn't sleep. Every car horn outside made me jump. Every shadow on the wall looked like a man waiting. Safety, I realized, was not a door or a fence. It was a feeling my body didn't know how to believe yet. My family didn't stop. Even with the court order, they found new ways to slip past the edges of the law, like water leaking through a cracked wall. First, it was my aunts, showing up at Mrs. Carter's gate with steaming trays of food, their faces arranged in masks of grief. "Your grandmother is dying," one said, pressing a covered dish toward me like it was an invitation back into their control. Mrs. Carter didn't even open the door. She called the police without hesitation, her voice crisp, as if she'd done this 100 times before. The officers sent them away, but the smell of the food lingered like a ghost, stirring up memories I wanted to forget. Then came the flowers. Bright, expensive arrangements delivered to the gate with cards signed "Love" always in handwriting that was both familiar and menacing. Legal threats followed in thick envelopes, accusing me of defamation, demanding I return family property. My social media was hacked. Posts appeared under my name calling myself unstable, a liar. Strangers commented, questioning my sanity. Even though I knew it wasn't me, seeing my own face next to those words made me feel like I was splitting in two. The deepest cut came from Mia, my cousin. She had been in my secret group chat, the only one who knew the full truth. Late at night, we'd shared whispered plans of escape, bits of hope. One morning, her video appeared online, her face pale and her voice flat and robotic. "She poisoned me against our family," Mia said, staring straight into the camera. "She's not well. She's dangerous." It was like watching someone burn a bridge while you were still standing on it. That betrayal cut deeper than any belt ever had. I didn't cry at first, I just sat there, numb, feeling the weight of every exit closing. Turning point came in court. My family filled the benches, their stares like daggers, their whispers like a swarm of insects. Their lawyer stood up and painted me as a confused teenager corrupted by Western lies, a parrot of outsiders who wanted to destroy a proud tradition. His voice was oily and sure of itself, the kind of voice that wins people over. I felt my knees weaken. But then Ms. Bennett stood. She spoke not like a teacher but like a witness, her words measured and precise. She described my essays, how I had hidden truths inside metaphors, how cooking lessons meant burns and marriage prep meant beatings. She placed copies on the table for the judge. When it was my turn, my hands shook, but my voice came out clear. I rolled up my sleeves and showed my scars. Some were pink, some white, some ridged like rope. "This is what tradition did to me," I said. The courtroom fell silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's pen. Then, a miracle. The back door opened and a woman walked in slowly, leaning on a cane. Her eyes found Victor, the man they'd wanted me to marry, and he froze. "I was 14 when I married him," she said, her voice steady despite her limp. 4 pregnancies by 19 destroyed my kidneys. My family faked my death to save face. The room gasped. She handed over medical records and photos of a grave with her name on it, but no body beneath. Her presence shattered the story my family had built. The judge made the protective order permanent. The words felt like a door locking behind me, but also like one opening ahead. My parents stood. My mother ripped off her scarf, her face contorted with rage. "You are dead to us," she hissed. She walked out without looking back. It burned. Of course it burned, but as I watched her leave, something inside me loosened. For the first time, I felt the faint, unfamiliar weight of freedom settling on my shoulders, not as a dream, but as a life waiting to begin. They didn't stop. Men broke into Evelyn's house one night, shattering my bedroom window with a rock. Glass sprayed across the floor as I scrambled into the bathroom, locking the door with shaking hands. I clutched a pair of scissors like a weapon, every nerve in my body alive with terror. I whispered prayers to no one in particular, just begging for time. Then sirens. Red and blue lights flickered against the walls, the sound slicing through the night. Once again, the police arrived just in time. Evelyn knew we couldn't stay. Within days, I was moved to a new safe house, this time an apartment that felt more like a bunker than a home. It belonged to a retired cop named Mr. Daniel Hayes, whose walls were lined with cameras and reinforced locks. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low, steady, the kind of voice you believe because it leaves no room for doubt. Safety gave me space to fight back. With Ms. Bennett's help, I began creating disguised information packets, legal rights hidden inside math problems, shelter numbers tucked between fake homework assignments. We slipped them quietly into schools, and soon girls began finding them. One, a 14-year-old named Aisha, escaped her own arranged marriage after discovering my notebook. She called me trembling, and when I heard her whisper, "I'm free," my chest ached with relief. Then 6 more reached out, their voices a mix of terror and hope. Coached them the way I once wished someone had coached me, giving them the words to save themselves. Of course, my father struck back. His lawyer accused me in court of corrupting minors. But I refused to stay silent. I met with journalist Sarah Klein, handing her documents and testimony under the promise of anonymity. Her article went viral. Overnight, my story became more than mine. It became a spark. More girls stepped forward, teachers whispered support, and suddenly we weren't just surviving, we were organizing. We called ourselves the Liberty Network. Our packets traveled through school nurses, tucked into binders and exam sheets. Every time a girl called, I felt the balance tilt further toward hope. Fatima, one of the first to find courage, sent me a photo months later. She was in scrubs, working as a nurse. Proof that escape didn't just mean survival, it meant a future. My family retaliated by disowning me publicly, their faces plastered on a community newsletter where my name was struck out like I never existed. It should have crushed me, but instead it only hardened my resolve. I'd lost their version of belonging, but I'd gained something better, purpose. On my final court date, the courtroom filled again. But this time, the benches weren't crowded with hostile relatives. They were packed with girls like me, teachers, social workers, survivors who had clawed their way out of the same darkness. When the judge upheld the order permanently, I felt years of fear loosen. Outside, Nadia, Victor's first wife who had once been declared dead, wrapped me in a hug and whispered, "We're not invisible anymore." That night, my phone rang again. A girl's voice trembled on the line, her words breaking like mine once had. "I found your notebook," she said. "Can you help me?" And I did. As I gave her the phrases, the strategies, the numbers that could save her, I realized this was more than survival. This was legacy. My family could erase my name, but they couldn't erase the truth I'd set free. Every girl who learned her rights, everyone who escaped, was a spark they could never extinguish. And through it all, I learned 5 lessons I want you to remember. When silence protects abusers, not you. Speaking out is terrifying, but it is the only way the cycle breaks. Family can betray you, but family can also be chosen. I lost mine, but I found allies in teachers, survivors, and friends who stood in the fire with me. 3 Fear doesn't mean weakness. It means you're alive, and moving forward in spite of it is the purest form of courage. For your scars are evidence, not shame. What others used to break you can become proof that you survived. 5 Freedom is worth everything. Even exile, even rejection. 'Cause once you claim your own life, no one can take it back. The war isn't over. But the battle that mattered, proving we can choose our own lives, has already been won. If this story moved you, if you believe more girls need to hear it, please like, share, and subscribe. Every click spreads a spark, and together, sparks become fire.